Good morning. It's 8:03. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Petersen at wakeupAmericaShow.com. We are brought to you by Lear Capital. My friends at Lear Capital will be joining me this morning at 8:30. You don't want to miss that. Make sure to visit them at learaustin.com for all your gold and silver needs. All right. A man who's solid gold himself. Well, he's the gold standard of libertarian points of view. Is the host of the Judging Freedom podcast. He's my good friend and our weekly guest, Judge Andrew Napolitano, who's joining us on the program this morning. Good morning, Judge. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Austin. Thank you again for a generous introduction.
we love having you on the show today, Judge. And all of our friends are just they've been hitting me up for days and just saying, "Have you talked to the judge about this story? Are you going to ask the judge about it?" And the reason why my followers are so keenly interested is because one of our group of friends, we kind of we team up together online, we libertarians. One of my group of friends was actually named in the leaks that was suppressed by the Democratic National Committee. They submitted a request to Twitter to take down my friend's tweet. We call him Squiggly. His name's Kevin, but we call him Squigs. But he was named as one of the people whose free speech rights were suppressed, I believe, by the Democratic National Convention. So I guess my first question here is if it was the DNC that did this and not, Biden himself, is it still unconstitutional? Is it illegal? What are your thoughts on this massive drop?
Well, I mean, this is fascinating. We seem to learn a little bit more about it each day. We have to start with a couple of basics. And one is that the First Amendment only restrains government, even though it says Congress shall make no law. It has been interpreted after the 14th Amendment to apply to all government, but only to the government. So if Twitter, I'm just going to use Twitter as an example. I'm not saying that any of this is factual, but if Twitter, for example, wanted to do everything it could to help Joe Biden defeat Donald Trump in 2020, including suppressing damning but probably truthful information about Joe's son, and maybe a rabbit hole leading to Joe's bank account as well. And it did that as a favor to officials in the Democratic National Committee, or it did it because it hated Trump and wanted Biden to get elected, though it probably violates journalistic ethics. It certainly doesn't violate the law. But if Twitter did that at the behest of somebody in the government, FBI agents, for example, or the general counsel to the FBI, or someone who had the power to say, do this for us and we'll go easy on you, or we'll do a favor for you, then we enter a very dangerous area called state action. And state action takes place when a private actor, Twitter, and the government, in this hypothetical, the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security, are engaged in a symbiotic relationship. I'm putting my fingers together. One hand is the FBI or DHS, and the other hand is Twitter. They are so intertwined that they are benefiting each other. Then the First Amendment restraints can be imposed upon the private actor. That's the lawsuit as we speak, Austin, that has been brought by 16 state attorneys general, and it's before a federal judge in New Orleans. They're not asking for money from Twitter. They're asking that going forward, Twitter and other big tech, it's not just Twitter as the defendant in the case, be restrained from sanctioning on the basis of the content of speech. So if I have a bullhorn and I say, vote for Donald Trump at 3 a.m. in a residential neighborhood, can the government silence me? Yes, but it's because of the time, place, and manner of my speech. It's not because of the content. So if Twitter is sanctioning because of the content and they're doing it as a favor to the government, then the First Amendment will apply to Twitter and they will lose the right to do that.
If you're just tuning in to the Wake Up America show, I'm speaking to Judge Andrew Napolitano. We're speaking about the release of files from Twitter last week. We are learning this morning that apparently a former deputy counsel of the FBI was a top lawyer at Twitter and was apparently involved in trying to prevent journalists Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss from releasing some of these documents and files. This is an ongoing story with breaking news. Now, Judge, when you hear this name, Jim Baker, he was described by Matt Taibbi as kind of a Zelig figure, which I explained earlier was a sort of like unassuming, type of person who just suddenly seems to always appear in the middle of these massive controversial news stories. What do you think? I mean, legal opinions aside, your view, the Constitution aside here, what do you personally think about the revelations about this Jim Baker character being involved and potentially involved in the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop leaks? Is this a
I'm not
situation where
surprised.
you smoke where
I'm
there's
not
smoke, there's
surprised at
fire?
all. Yes, I'm not surprised at all, and I don't know how he could possibly prevent Matt Taibbi from releasing this. I mean, Matt is an investigative journalist that we all know or know of, known for intellectual honesty and for being an iconoclast. So he and you and I like to fit in the same company. Um, uh, I don't know how that could silence him. He is the chosen journalist for Elon Musk's revelations. I don't know Jim Baker personally, but Jim Baker is the lawyer who testified for the government in the trial for lying to the FBI against Michael Sussman, and the jury disbelieved him. The jury found Sussman not guilty after about 30 minutes of deliberation. Uh, but he was a very, very, very political general counsel to the FBI, which is probably why the old Twitter, the Jack Dorsey Twitter, before Elon Musk came along, hired him because of his contacts with in the federal government, who could help them get done what they wanted done, or acquire information that they wanted to acquire, or suppress information that they wanted to suppress. Again, if done not at the behest of the government, unscrupulous but lawful. If done at the behest of the government, they're going to get in a lot of trouble. By the way, I was sanctioned the other day. I got kicked off of TikTok for 5 days because I made the following statement: Stuart Rhodes should not have been prosecuted with his 4 friends for a conspiracy to overthrow the government by violence, because when the conspiracy is impossible to perform, the government should not prosecute it. The government has better things to do. TikTok said that was encouraging violence, and therefore they suppressed that perfectly legal argument, which was
Oh.
made in a public courtroom.
Judge,
But
welcome to our
because
world.
Twitter did this, because not Twitter, TikTok, because TikTok did this, because they hate me or hate libertarians or hate what I was saying, they can do it. If some FBI agent said, you got to silence him because of that, then I have a case.
Well, my concern would be that it would be the Chinese government doing something like that, in which case that's a whole new can of worms.
Yes.
If you're just tuning in to the Wake Up America show with Austin Petersen, I'm Austin Petersen, and I'm speaking to Judge Andrew Napolitano. He's the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which you can download on any of your mobile devices and read his weekly column at judgenap.com. Now, Judge, I'd like to talk about your column that's coming out this week because I think it is of utmost importance, especially to the conversation that we are having amongst the vast right-wing conspiracy, the conservative and libertarian movement. And this is a discussion that we're having about the will to power that is being held by populist conservatives, national conservatives, they call themselves, who say that what is the use of having power if you don't use it? And they criticize libertarians and libertarian Republicans like ourselves because they claim that we are weak and that we don't have a will to power, that we wouldn't use it if we had it. But specifically, your discussion about protecting the rights of people who you disagree with, I think, is so important. And give me just a moment to set this up for you, because I know you frequently in your speeches discuss a play and a film called A Man for All Seasons. And I'd like you to just talk about this for a moment, because in one famous scene in this play, there's a discussion about giving the devil the benefit of the law, which I think is critically important to our national discussion today when we hear Antifa saying, take away their guns. And when we hear, Republican conservatives ostensibly saying that, no rights for people who disagree with this. Communists don't have rights. They're not people. They need to have their rights removed because they would take away our rights. Can you talk to us a little bit about protecting the speech and liberty of even people that you disagree with?
So Thomas More is the former Lord Chancellor of England, the rough equivalent 400 years ago to the Prime Minister today. And he is incarcerated because he refuses to acknowledge that the king is the head of the church on earth. And the horrible laws of the time, that's considered treason. And he's having a conversation with a young acolyte of his named Richard Rich. And in the conversation, they're talking about whether everybody is entitled to liberty, even when they're wrong. And Moore says, the land is planted thick with laws to protect everybody's rights. And Rich says, well, some people don't deserve rights. And Moore says, who? And Rich says, the devil. I would cut down every law in England in order to get to the devil. And Moore says, oh, and when the devil turned round and went after you, what law would there be to protect you? Who would protect you from the wind that then would blow? End of the conversation. Moore's point is that everybody has natural human rights. And among those rights are the right to think as you wish and say what you think and publish what you say, no matter how offensive it may be to others. So our former brothers and sisters in the libertarian movement, who now have become these nationalist conservatives who want to strip the rights of those with whom they disagree, could find that argument being used on them when those with whom they disagree come into power.
This is an important conversation to be having, Judge, because as the left and right being more at its throats, it seems than ever, more and more people are pushing for what we call a national divorce, which for those who, in our movement that are pro-secessionist and anti-Lincoln, that sounds like something that would be, quite entertaining and quite interesting. My concern with that, though, Judge, is, on the national divorce question is, when we talk about what strategies we have towards liberty, I would be concerned that a national crack up would actually lead to less liberty, that what would actually happen is that the worst of the pro-government forces of each portion of each republic, if you would have it, would rise to power. So, consider what, the worst of what California has to offer, the worst of what New Jersey has to offer, and even the worst of what Missouri has to offer. It may not be as bad as California or New Jersey, but if the I guess one thing that I agreed with Alexander Hamilton on, and I know that this is heresy for me to say and to say it to you especially, but one thing that I agreed with Alexander Hamilton on in the Federalist Papers, Judge, was that as a united nation, that the states would be less likely to go to war with one another. That if Texas had a problem with Mexico, that the sort of cooling effect that New York, not sharing a national border with Mexico, would have, and having a vote and two electoral votes and having, two senators, being balanced with Texas, would prevent Texas from, going to war with Mexico. Do you agree with Alexander Hamilton that a united nation prevents, Kansas from going to war with Missouri or Texas from going to war with, Louisiana or New York? I mean, is liberty
Well,
better
I mean,
served by
as a
a
matter,
united nation or a divided one?
well, I mean, just as a matter of rational thinking, the statement is correct. And just because it came out of Alexander Hamilton's mouth doesn't mean we shouldn't recount it. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Remember that one line that Hamilton and Jefferson, they wanted to kill each other almost literally, agreed on, which was when the federal treasury becomes a federal trough, and the people learn that, they will send to Washington only those who promise to bring home the biggest piece of the pie. But back to your question about Hamilton, among our natural rights is the right to leave the government, the right to secede. So just as Texas and Alabama and New Jersey and Missouri joined the Union voluntarily by a simple act of legislation, they can leave the Union voluntarily by a simple act of legislation. And Jefferson County, is there a Jefferson County in Missouri?
There is.
Jefferson County can secede from Missouri, just like Sussex County, where I live in New Jersey, and there isn't even an organized Democratic Party. Sussex County can secede from New Jersey because that is part of your natural right to be rid of a government to which you did not consent. But I understand your argument that if New Jersey did secede from the Union, it might be even more oppressive here now without federal judges to rein in the excesses of Governor Murphy and the Democrats having 2/3 majority in both houses of the legislature, might be even a more oppressive place. Well, then I can secede from New Jersey. Remember, under our beliefs, the individual is sovereign, not the state, and not groups of individuals, just the individual.
These are great conversations, Judge, and I hope do I have a few more minutes of your time because I have another burning question I'd like to ask you.
Boston, you have as much of my time as you want.
Okay, good. One thing that I've started to accept over the years as I've continued my study of our philosophy and principles and history is the idea of the strategies for liberty, right? So in terms of, if New Jersey were to secede and then go and be even more authoritarian or totalitarian than it is right now, then I don't think New Jersey should secede, right? So in terms of strategies for liberty, I look, for example, at like the Jim Crow laws uh, of the um, of the 19th and the I guess the 19th and 20th centuries. So the Jim Crow laws
Right.
in the United States, when the federal government stepped in to overturn the laws of the states, which were abridging the individual rights of the citizens, that is a violation of the principles of federalism because the initial Constitution did not prevent the states from taking away people's guns, setting up a church. If they wanted to, if they want to quarter troops in homes, they could, right? It wasn't until we began to incorporate the Bill of Rights into the states via the 14th Amendment and this incorporation doctrine that we started to see a scenario where now the states can't take away people's individual rights, and we've seen Supreme Court cases that have upheld this. I believe, if I'm not, you can correct me on this, McDonald v. Chicago. But my question is this because I've become less of a pure federalist in the sense that it's not important the mechanism as important the mechanism of liberty as much as it is that liberty is attained in that the state should not be allowed to take away your Second Amendment rights. And if it's the federal government preventing, New York, like as it has done in some of these Supreme Court cases, from abridging the Second Amendment rights of its citizens, that's what's really important. That's what really matters. So the strategy
Well,
for me, it's about the strategy for liberty. If the federal government protects the individual liberty, I'm for it. If the state government does it, then I'm for it. Does that make sense?
I am so crazy about you. It's almost as if you're my nephew because we agree on so many things. Yes, I fully agree with you on this, and this is a divide amongst libertarians. There's the Hans Hoppe libertarians who believe everything is property rights. There's the Murray Rothbard, Ron Paul libertarians who believe everything is natural rights. That's the camp that you and I are in. Our rights come from our humanity, and the government cannot take our rights away from us. They're inalienable. We can waive those rights by assaulting someone else's rights. But it is just as wrong for the state of New Jersey to silence my speech or take my guns as it is for the federal government to silence my speech and take my guns. Now, that is an argument derived from the origins of human liberty as within us, whether you believe we are the highest and best and most rational creatures on earth by natural selection or by divine will. Whatever it is, our rights come from within us. But if our rights don't come from within us, if they only come from property, if all of our rights are based just on our ability to exclude people from our property, but we can do whatever we want on the property, well, that defies the sovereignty of the individual and the natural origin of our rights. That's the divide that we're talking about. And you and I are on the side of the angels, figuratively and literally, when it comes
So this
to
is, I
the
mean,
origin of human liberty.
I've got a couple more minutes then, Judge. Just one last thing here for you, because when I was having a conversation with one of my conservative friends the other night, we were talking about the question of banning gay marriage and the question of whether or not the federal government should intervene to prevent the states from banning gay marriage. And my argument was that yes, the federal government should prevent the states from banning gay marriage. They said, "Well, why were you on the side of Roe versus Wade being overturned if you thought that that should go to the states?" I said, because ultimately that serves the cause of liberty in preventing abortions. If it were required for me to have some kind of a federal action to prevent abortions, then I would be in favor of that, because I'm in favor of advancing liberty by any means necessary, because that is the ultimate good. So then my question is, Judge, did you support the Defense of Marriage Act, even though it defies the state's right to issue marriage contracts or supersedes them, and protects the rights of gay married couples in those states, such as it is right now?
Yes, in a word, yes, for the very reasons that you articulated. As Justice Kennedy wrote in the Obergefell decision, that's the Supreme Court opinion upholding same-sex marriage and invalidating state laws that interfere with it. It's none of the government's business
But that's
who you
the
choose
conservatives don't
to
agree with
marry.
this, Judge. The problem with conservatives is that their view is not that they don't agree with us that the government should be out of the marriage business. Conservatives think that it is the job of government to issue marriage licenses only to straight couples and to prevent any other form of arrangement, because they claim that a marriage is an institution ordained by God, and since they find this institution, a gay marriage, to be sacrilegious, therefore it should be rendered legally invalid as well. Your response?
So marriage is a contract between two people. What the
Well,
hell does the state have to do with it?
well, for real hardcore libertarians, Judge, two or more people.
Right, there you go. I'm hardcore. There you go.
Judge, Judge.
Move to Utah.
Oh, I thought it was going to get us in trouble, Judge. All right, I've got to go to commercial break. Judge, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners? Maybe give us a preview of what you're going to be talking about today on Judging
Oh
Freedom.
God, I'm having Jack Devine on Judging Freedom today. Jack is a former very high-ranking CIA official. He was in charge of Russian espionage in Russia, so Americans spying on Russians in Russia. He's the most pro-Russia person around, but I feel I have to have him on. I mean, he is the most pro-Ukraine person around, who believes it is the duty of the American government to overthrow Putin.
Wow.
So we're gonna have some fun with that.
Boy, that's good stuff. Boy, Judge, another conversation. I'm going to need a cigarette after that one. That's going to
That is Judging Freedom, 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern time today, and of course on demand anytime after that. Jack Devine.
Judge Andrew Napolitano, our good friend, host of Judging Freedom. Thank you for your time today, Judge. Great conversation as usual.
Oh,
Have a good one.
pleasure, Austin. All